All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Dan, one of your hosts here. And Chelsea seemingly have found a way to sign a player without a bunch of noise, without a bunch of briefs to multiple members of the media, without a bunch of speculation from supporters across social media. They got it done over the weekend in relatively quiet, under the radar fashion. And we're talking about new players coming into Chelsea. Renato Veiga expected to be announced sometime this week, according to multiple reports from the esteemed journalist community. It has to be a special with our good friend Sam, him at CFC Central. And so, Sam, first time you and I have talked in quite a bit, but I'm excited to dive in with you to learn a little bit more about a player that no one was expecting to be signed by Chelsea or to be signed by a Premier League team in general heading into this summer window. And I guess maybe on just the shock factor, how, on a scale of 0 to shocked, how shocked are you?
Yeah, this would rank quite highly, to be honest, in terms of George to my bump. I'm completely unprepared for this one. I genuinely had no idea, so bold from the blue. But I think it's also not unexpected in terms of the patterns that we've seen, because earlier on in the summer, we were linked with a couple of strikers, John Duran and then Samo Marodion, and then suddenly we just leapt for Mark Guiu in a couple of days and snapped him up. And not like a lot of people went mentioning him as an outside player, but he obviously very well known. Vega, a lot of players that I've watched in Europe, he was not one of them. So again, an interesting name to pop up. But he also seems to be maybe in the hierarchy like the third rung. So if you don't get like a first world class left back, then we looked at Calafiori and apparently he's going to Arsenal. And then we asked ourselves, okay, who's the next guy in line? And then we saw who Basel replaced him with and basically said he's our man. So we're going for somebody there. And again, it's a very niche requirement because we're looking at fulfilling Maresca's tactical demands. So if he is in fact still looking at inverted fullbacks, if he wants one of his fullbacks to be able to play either central midfield or as a centre back, then this guy fits both your briefs. And that's a very unique situation to have. So quite intriguing in terms of that aspect and can't wait to get stuck in.
Well, as we do on these episodes, we're going to get a little into the history of player. We're going to talk about their background, how they got to Chelsea, go through their strengths. What are we going to be looking forward to as we see them don Chelsea blue this season? Areas that they might be able to improve in, where they're going to fit in the squad and under Maresca, and then a bunch of listener questions as well too. So all of that coming in this episode. Before we do that, the quick admin that we always get out of the way. Just a thanks to our amazing community for those leaving 5-star reviews in Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you've done so yet, today's a good day to do so. We'd always appreciate it. You also can join us on YouTube as well. We're posting full videos and also dropping sneaky short videos as well. So you can jump over there, subscribe, hit the bell icon to get notified, like and comment on the videos. Those are always appreciated. And you can join the conversation in our free or paid versions of our Discord community. It's another great way to support the podcast and get stuck in with some like-minded Chelsea fans. And then you also can sign up for our free weekly newsletter, the London is Blue Dispatch, written by Sam, and I'm sure he'll have another banger come in this week if Chelsea continue the activity and getting ready for a preseason that is very, very close to starting. We're less than 20 days at this point until Chelsea will have not one, but maybe two of their games underway and completed in the U.S. So very, very quickly, the work needs to get done and the squad needs to be fully assembled so Maresca can bring everyone he needs to the U.S. and assess appropriately where we're at heading into the season. But Sam, as we do, I'll turn the reins over to you. I'll give you the opportunity to spin some yarn and tell us a little bit about Vega's background, where his footballing journey started, and how he's getting himself to Chelsea through the highs and the lows of his journey.
Yeah, so apparently football runs in his veins. He's the son of Nelson Vega, who's a Cape Verde or a Cabo Verde international. And he essentially was born in Lisbon. joined the Sporting Academy at the age of 7. He was there for 3 years, and then he went away for 6 years and was re-signed in 2019. Now, in Jan 2013, he was sent on loan to Augsburg in the Bundesliga, where he played as a left back and a left centre back predominantly, but I would say he failed to impress. The reports that I've read from his time there, not very positive. A lot of them saying that, he didn't have the game IQ, wasn't looking comfortable in terms of progression, looked like a young player, just like a deer caught in headlights. So didn't apparently have a good loan. And Augsburg were again fighting for relegation then, so tough place to be. And he was initially sent there for a year, but his loan was cut short and he returned to Sporting after 6 months. Now, in Portugal, lots of competition for midfield. Ugarte was there, they had Morita, and then they went inside Morten Hulman from Lecce in Italy. And seeing no pathway in central midfield, he basically decided to move. And Basel came in and said, we'll give you a midfield slot. So he came on, joined the Swiss club, scored a free kick on his debut in a 2-2 draw versus FC Zurich. And I would say it was a quite nightmare season for Basel because they finished ninth out of 12 teams in the league, which is quite unprecedented for them. Their previous league finishes were like second, third, fifth, and they've dropped to like very, very unthinkable lows in the Swiss league. But even in that season, he managed to shine as one of the better players. In the international scene, he's captained the Portugal youth sides, and he's a current regular for the under 20s. In terms of his position, he's a defensive midfielder or a central midfielder by trade, but he's also played left back and he's also played centre back in a back three and a back four. So very versatile. And obviously, like we mentioned at the start of the squad, he was the player signed by Basel to replace Ricardo Calafiori, who obviously excelled at the Euros and had all kinds of interest from big clubs and Arsenal. So looks like he'll be going there. So that's the tail of the tape, and that's where we stand. It came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it, but yeah, quite intrigued.
Well, we know that Chelsea wanted another player in defense as we talked to Matt Law and Ben Jacobs and others over the last couple of weeks. And what the reporting was heading into the window. We know that a left sided defender was something that Reska and Chelsea were going to hopefully add as a part of this grouping. Didn't necessarily feel like it was the top priority, with a winger and a striker potentially being the players that felt like they were more important to get across the line. But I think to the points that you mentioned, it feels as if this is a signing before the signing, necessarily the player that might likely be scooped up by a Brighton or a Bournemouth or someone with a astute department, to then a year from now is going for, instead of 30 million euro or 35 million euro, is going for 50 to 60, because they are now on the radar of every major club. And you're hoping that that bet is true, and not necessarily he doesn't have the ability or the scalability to excel in the Premier League kind of in the upcoming season. And so do you agree with that assessment, or do you feel like maybe it's more of a bigger gamble that is taking place here?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the last two deals that we've done, Mark Yu and Renato Veiga, I think both these guys are sort of like for a fee where it's very hard to make a loss on them. Let's be very honest. Even if the next 2 years they, God forbid, don't work out and they're unable to reach the potential which their numbers seem to suggest, I don't think it's hard to sell GU for 5, 6 million to any club across the top five leagues. I think it's easy to do. The same with Vega. If he's coming on a 5, 6 year deal, his book value is about 2 million. So again, from a financial perspective, it's a low risk deal. And that's what we seem to be targeting. Spent all our big money on what I would say the big hitters were in South America. So when you look at Kendry Paez, superb deal for the money that we paid for him. But Estevao has picked up spectacularly. He's looking like better and better with every passing game. Obviously, Andre Santos from the season before. So all the money's gone into those first choice signings that could help us reach Vision 2025 in terms of a strong first team. But this just seems to be, I think, a necessary risk that you have to take to maybe be a temporary solution or a fix for what could be, a unique tactical demands from the manager. So I would say it's hard to go and find a player that's able to cover three positions simultaneously. So the sample size must have been very, very small. Honestly, the left backs that I was looking for before Maresca joined just went into the bin. So I'm unable to say that, any of those would have fit in. So it's either Kukurea or him now. So it'll be interesting to see what the plan is. Do we directly throw him in, or is he seen as sort of like a long term? I don't even know which position he's seen in. Like he's seen as a central midfielder, if he's seen as a left back, and if he's not seen as a central midfielder, then why did he move? Considering he thinks it's his strongest position. So lots of interesting questions around the signing. But I think if you read into it, it's just a low risk, high reward kind of signing where you can't make a loss.
And to the point you mentioned about taking a loss, so a good friend of the pod, Nazar Kinsella, tracking the fact that Chelsea are up now to £93 million in incoming transfers, which include desbury-hall, Guy, Kellerman, and others as it relates to this, including Veiga now. And then you have the outgoings at 89 million. So very close to that net zero number that some clubs love to chant about or cheer about, but definitely makes it a scenario where Chelsea are adding hopefully value and doing so in a way that allows them to not run afoul of any type of financial issues heading into the future. But we want to get into the strengths. We want to talk about areas that Veiga can improve. And we're going to do that right after our first break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Sam. So I know it might have been challenging, difficult, a little bit of a wild goose chase to track down enough viewable minutes to make some assessments on Veiga. I will say he is one of the least profiled players in terms of highlight reels, just on a general YouTube search I have seen in quite some time. So why don't we walk through, in your assessment, what his strengths are after you've watched a couple of full games, full 90s that he's been a part of?
Yeah, this was quite easy to find. So if you do want to watch him, please go on YouTube and type Basel versus full, and you're going to find like full games. So I would say didn't really involve the kind of notorious things I've done in the past, reach out to Russian hackers and say, could you please show me a couple of games from the Brazilian second division so I can like watch it in peace without getting into trouble. But the things I've done for this sport. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I want to say this before I begin because people are probably going to see the numbers and the things I talk about and say, wow, we've signed a world beater. But the Swiss league's numbers are a bit funky. So just to give you an example, in the Premier League, okay, the top 25 passes per 90, the guys making the most amount of passes per 90 minutes, the top 25 guys, only six players in those top 25 have a pass percentage of less than 90. Now, in the Swiss league, there are zero players with a pass completion of 90 or above in the top 50. So it's a very open league, and the top pass maker per 90 minutes has half the passes of the top pass maker in the Premier League. So that's a lot more pass intensive in the Premier League, lots of short passes, lots of great accuracy. Well, the Swiss league is just ping pong. Like, there's spaces everywhere and people are trying to get like an assist from 80 yards. So it's very conducive to Kevin De Bruyne playing. There are Kevin De Bruyne at center back in the Swiss league. So it's quite interesting to watch from that perspective. Wasn't a boring league to watch at all. But something that really fascinated me about Vega is his long passing. I think it's quite exceptional, even adjusting for league issues and the room afforded to him, he tends to pick out some incredible hits. And he isn't just using his long passing to progress or to switch from a crowded side to an underloaded side. He's trying to hit a long pass into the box. So just to give you an example, against Lausanne, I was watching the game and he ended up hitting 20 long balls in that game and he completed 15 from central defensive midfield. And I think three long balls he hit from this position, the left back spot right next to the center circle, and all three of them went from that area about 40 meters across to a fullback in the penalty box, and supremely accurate, like hitting the chest or like the foot on the stride for the player. So he tends to pick up some really really good accurate long balls and uses it as a weapon. Doesn't like use it just to just for the heck of it. So I would say like his technical standpoint is 100% quite there. In terms of his quantity, 5 long passes completed a game was the highest by any midfielder in the Swiss league. Obviously, we have to caveat that with the fact that he's played 3 positions, and at centre back, your numbers do get a boost. So, but he is quite prolific, and he's also got like the second most passes per 90 in the Swiss league. So, seems like somebody who likes the ball, likes using it well, likes to pass it around. So that would be the number one strength. The second, I would say, is technical security. Again, not really the ideal league in terms of being tested, but when he's on the ball and keyword facing the goal, he tends to keep it well, tends to use it well. He's got a very tall, long body, so he's able to shield it and quite nifty with his feet for a big man. So he can stride away from danger, just takes one leap and he's like 6 feet away from you. So quite handy in that sense. He's also got nice short carries, so able to feint and then get away from you. So in terms of just keeping the ball and being tidy with it in midfield, seems like a good player. The third I would say is like progression. So I think his progressive abilities are quite good. Again, wouldn't want to put too much stock into it, but he does seem to be quite handy in terms of just dribbling and trying the risky pass. He spin around quite often and pick line breaking passes from the middle. So somebody who's not afraid to take the risky option and get the team forward. So I would say those three strengths 100% stand out for me.
It feels like things that maybe under Maresca's system. I guess the question is, you talked about earlier this idea that the left backs that you were scouting prior to Maresca joining and after Maresca joining, you really binned the candidates that we would have been looking at previously. How much better does this set of skills that we've just talked about, and I know there are a few more that you want to get into, how does that better fit what Maresca is going to want to do versus maybe some of the other individuals you were considering as a candidate for Chelsea's left-sided defense?
Yeah, I think just from a tactical standpoint, the requirements are different. So if I was looking at Maresca's Leicester, he often played Hamza Chaudhry at right back, and Hamza Chaudhry is a central midfielder. So again, you look at that and you suddenly fear for your life because here's a manager who admires Pep Guardiola and is playing, openly playing a player out of position. So I don't think the stock here is as much on defending, although Hamza is a very combative midfielder, very good at defending. But it's more about, I think, being defensively astute, contributing to some kind of I would say defensive aspect to the rest defense. You've got to be either a really, really good transition defender, or you've got to be very good at, playing on the front foot, man marking people. So those are two requirements that sort of take place. And the fact that he's played as a double pivot, as a central midfielder who presses people in possession, I think he does have those skills. I'd say be a little more comfortable than a left back pressing people very, very high. While if you ask a fullback to press people, closer to the opponent's box, they get a little nervous because what if a long ball goes in behind? I've left my centre back empty. So in terms of that tactical requirement, I think he's got an education. I wouldn't say he's better than the people I've looked at, but I would say he's more accustomed to it. So again, I would just say that the requirements are different. There are roles that he will be asked to play, which a lot of defensive players in our system will struggle with, which will be something of a pod that we reserve for summer. But yeah, I think for now I'll say like it's just the versatility that helps. Having a defensive education that requires 3 different zones to perfect is probably playing in his favor.
And so I know that he, if you look at the stats just within the Swiss league, 2 goals, 1 assist, so 3 goal contributions. But you talked a little bit about just his technical security progression. What about the final ball, maybe just, and then also is he more aerially dominant because he's also 6'2", which is a little taller than some of the other players we've gone out and scouted? So we've added Tosin at 6'4", we've potentially added 6'2" here. Like it feels like we're actually getting taller to take advantage potentially of some new set piece routines that our new set piece coach from Brentford might want to implement into the coming season.
Yeah, I think it's an easy way to say it's not going to be a tall order. I think we're just like stocking up on giraffes and like trying to make sure that, nobody's going to enter our box through the air. Although I don't know what happens if some team scouts like a 4 feet 2 inch center forward and like he just runs through people's legs and scores. That'll be a different tactical equation. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the final ball, very impressive. I will say this, a lot of central defensive players or central midfielders who tend to play in deeper positions don't have, um, I would say, the vision and the just the technical skill set to pull off what he does. A lot of the times that he plays balls into the box, the weight on those passes, the vision, excellent. I think it's very, very underrated. And he's definitely somebody who's first and foremost just a pass master. I really don't know which position, I see him in the future because it's a little hazy to me, but some position or some role that allows him to express himself on the ball is definitely going to be a priority. So I think final ball is very good. Obviously, won't be able to do that from left back, but somebody who can do it from zones closer to that, I think you'd probably want him in central midfield somewhere. So yeah, I think final pass is good. It's just how much of it can you ask him to express? Being tactically disciplined and finding the right balance is going to be a big, big issue. In terms of his defensive abilities, again, like you mentioned, he's quite tall. So what I like about him is when he's closing down, he tends to use his reach well. So he's obviously got Bambi feet, so he can prod the ball away from people. And even when he's defending and when people try to get like a head start on him, he just stretches his leg out and tries to go in for a tackle. So tends to be, I would say, quite good in terms of being active defensively. He's not afraid to get stuck in, got a decent number of tackles in there. I think 1.8 per 90 is not bad. So, and considering the fact that he's in a very possession dominant team, so he's obviously not doing a lot of defensive work. So, um, yeah, he's quite good. Like he's quite involved, which is always nice to see. You asked the aerial question, and this is where I think I have a question mark because his numbers in the Swiss league say that he's winning 1.2 and his win percentage is 61%. But I don't quite know if it translates to the Premier League, despite his height, despite his, everything, the skill set. He doesn't jump very often. He does it as a last resort. So again, I've seen him in situations where he looks a little clumsy, looks a little desperate when he's trying to win the ball. So I don't quite know if this is a strength, which is why I don't want to say that, this is going to be 100% thing that you can count on set pieces. Even on the attacking set pieces I've seen, he doesn't really offer much of a threat unless he's taking a free kick, which he scored on debut. But when he's like making near post runs on, corners for headers, haven't seen him connect with a single one in 4 games. So that's saying something. So I really don't know whether this has been passed on as a strength to the recruitment, and he's 6'2", 61% in the air. He's definitely good. And people just haven't seen the tape to see if he's good or not. But that's something I'll stow away and probably get a couple more games in to see if it holds up. But right now I'm tentative on the aerial strengths.
So as we then migrate to this idea of strengths to not strengths, or areas that he is going to either need to improve on as he makes the transition to the Premier League, or areas that he just in general needs to improve in even if he had not made this move to Chelsea, what are those things that you're highlighting in terms of where he potentially could get caught out, where Maresca and team are going to have to coach up and coach out some of the current behaviors of the player?
Yeah, so Basel have a mixed system. So they ask him to do both responsibilities. So if you watch them trying to press an opposition team, he'll often be the most advanced midfielder. So he's pressing or man marking the opposition defensive midfielder to try and prevent a build up from happening. So in the defensive third of the other team, he's basically going to be man marking, the pivot around as much as he can. But when the ball progresses beyond the halfway line, he goes more zonal, and then he basically doesn't mark any man, and he's free to engage where he sees fit. And I think that sort of presents a mixed profile of strengths and weaknesses. He's obviously good at guarding space because he's a centre back. He has to be. So a lot of the times he defends like a centre back in defensive midfield. He'll anticipate well. He'll try to react to certain situations, try to close down. But the biggest red flag for me is that he's probably not the most mobile. Like I think he struggles with being agile or just being quick enough to react defensively. So the intention is there. He sees danger, but when he reacts to it, it's slow. And that could be, an issue. A lot of the times I've seen him do sliding tackles and they're half a second late. And in the Premier League, that's going to be probably 1.5 seconds late. So he's definitely going to be in trouble there. A lot of the quicker threats, there are not many in the Swiss League, but when he's come up against them, especially like in the left back zone, they quite easily tend to make him commit and get past him. He's a very passive defender. I'll just add, like he doesn't like putting in the first tackle. So he just wait for you to do things. And sometimes the attacker will just pull off a pass, which he fails to block, or he just puts a foot in and he gets like completely flat footed and bypass. So I think the lack of speed, the lack of recovery pace in transition is going to hurt him very, very badly. It doesn't
Mhm.
look like it in the Swiss league because the league is slow. If there are any Swiss people watching it, I really apologize. But in just the pace compared to the top three leagues is, I would say, drastically slower. So he's definitely going to be in trouble if he doesn't sort of get his actions right and if he doesn't react quickly enough. So that's going to be an issue. The second thing I've noticed is he generally does not call for the ball in the first phase. And he's very communicative. So a lot of the times he'll tell people at the back line to pass to certain options. He'll orchestrate play, but he never asks for the ball himself, which is quite interesting. Back to goal, when you want one of your midfielders to help out in build up, to receive and to turn. In 4 games, I haven't seen him receive under pressure and turn away from people. So I think this is a player who is not comfortable receiving on the turn or when there's pressure behind him. And that happens a lot in the Premier League. And the thing that Basel do to navigate this is he drops as an extra centre back or he goes to left back. Something Enzo
Mhm.
used to do at Benfica. But obviously Enzo is able to play back to goal very, very easily. Vega might not be able to. I think he's a centre back masquerading as a defensive midfielder. I don't think he's got the defensive nous or like the physical talents to play defensive midfield or central midfield in the Premier League. I think he could be a handy left back, a left back who's able to provide some sort of defensive cover in midfield or maybe slot in as a third centre back. But then again, how good is he in the air? I don't know. I generally think that that could be exposed as well. So lots of blind spots which I think will become clearer the moment he plays 5 games in the Premier League. But I do see him as a left back going into a back three, or maybe like tucking into central midfield, one of those two, which is good news because that frees up Reece James and Malo Gusto to do that thing. So fingers crossed.
I think you mentioned now Malagusto, and I think there's people who are going to ask the question on how similar this signing is to Malagusto with Vega, where you have someone at least currently in Mark Cucurella, whether you like him or dislike him, is having a really solid performance at the Euros and seemingly would be the left back of choice at the moment for Chelsea in terms of senior starts and Premier League readiness over someone like Vega. Do you view it similar in the sense that it's trying to sign someone who within 1 to 2 seasons could be the preeminent starter in that position for Chelsea, in the way that Malo Gusto maybe had an opportunity due to the Reece James injury to start more readily and more often than we probably planned for in his first season. Or are you looking at the fact that, Malo Gusto before coming to Chelsea was at Lyon for 3 seasons in terms of the senior team, had 3,500 minutes. And when you look at Vega, he's played 23 matches, 22 starts for Basel, with just over almost close to 1,900 minutes. It feels as if he's maybe the pre like an alpha version of Malo Gusto, not necessarily the beta or the production version of him on the left hand side.
I would agree with you, to be honest. And that's the thrill of having a new manager, because you have no idea what the hell is going to happen. Both of us discussed this on one of the pods, because I said I don't really see a place for Ben Chilwell if he does go with his Leicester blueprint. I don't see where Ben Chilwell fits. Generally, he's not a slot into the centre back kind of left back. He's not a invert into the central midfield kind of central midfielder slash inverted left back. I don't see either of the roles fitting him. So I would 100% see Kukureya as the starting left back. And then again, does Chilwell get sold? Does Levi play that role? Gusto's played left back. Does he end up there? Again, it's Maresca's watching games seriously, which is why we haven't heard from him at all, despite him starting work on the 1st of July. So I think he's locked in a room somewhere in Marbella, watching an incredible amount of games, trying to. He has no more hair left to lose, but he's desperately trying to figure out what he's going to do with this team. But yeah, I think this could be again. It'll be interesting to see what we do with Marquis, because if the idea is to develop him physically and to give him 1,500 minutes to 2,000 minutes in a season where we could play 60, 65 games, then it's a good way to acclimatize a younger player like him into the fold, and maybe then see whether he's a good fit for the role that you're trying to play. So he's had senior experience, but I would also say that Gius played that sort of football at a higher level. Obviously, Bundesliga is a good sort of level to be at. So he's both of them have, I would say, similar level of experience in a top three league. So maybe they're just backup players who are asked to step in from time to time and play maybe like 10, 15 games and whatever minutes come through it. But at this point, I think we're just making contingency measures. I still expect like a second center forward to come in. I perhaps also expect like another left back to come in. Might be controversial to say this, but yeah. So I generally like, I see a lot of the smoke in the Sam Omer or the on deal saying we really want him. Atletico don't want to sell. There could be something in there. Duran's got quiet. I don't know what's happening there, but I do think one of those two positions or both of those positions happen before the end of the year, before the end of the transfer season. So let's see, fingers crossed.
Well, we have a bunch of listener questions that we're going to get into as we continue our conversation about Chelsea's newest player, Renato Veiga. But we're going to do so after our last ad break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Sam. So the listener questions that we had pulled in here, Raphael, with one that we sort of answered before the break, was asking, does this mean we're looking to cash in on one of Colwell or Kukureya? Both provide either inverted fullback or into double pivot or into the back three, but surely one will be superfluous, assuming Chilwell will definitely be off. And I think we mentioned this, though I'll give you an opportunity to add a little bit more, but it does feel as if this is a end of days moment for Ben Chilwell. If we were to look at maybe just the stack ranking and the fact that you're also netting in that we might have another left back coming in, or we also might want to persevere with this idea of Colwell playing as a left back again. So what are your thoughts on maybe just where the stack ranking is from the left back position right now?
Yeah, quite intriguing. But I do see Kukureya as like first choice, like I mentioned, just purely because that's his first position. He's also sort of slotted into that inverted position and didn't quite go into run into a lot of trouble until he was forced to go back from central midfield to left back in one of the games. But Pochettino showed the way, saying if teams try to counter that, I think it was against Leicester, where they had an extra man covering, not Leicester, Nottingham Forest actually did it. So Forest had Morgan Gibbs White as the extra player marking the inverted player. So we had to actually send Kukurea back to left back in his original position to counter it. So Pochettino's basically done the trial and error experiment for Maresca, saying this is how it works out for you. So it's the easiest thing to do to not mess around with it and say, let's go with Kukurea first. I don't think Cole will get sold, no matter what the scenario. I think he's going to be first choice left centre back, no matter what happens. Um, and it'll be like him competing with Benoit Badiashile. There's no question about it. Those are two very, very good centre backs. I know people are iffy on BB after the season he's had, but he's again one of the best young centre backs in the world. Keep the faith. I think he's going to come very, very good next season. So that would be my hierarchy. I would say Kukurea first, mystery left back second, slash Renato Veiga coming in at left back. I think that's the hierarchy there.
So as we continue, Jess asking the question of I've listened to read opposing things. Is 1v1 defending a weakness of his?
Well, I've seen him defend centrally a lot against quicker players, and I would say he struggles a little bit. And it's also, I think, a mix of or a clash of his stylistic way of defending, which is to stand off and let the attacker make the decision. So I've seen him sort of bounce on his toes and try to screen, and the other player just like shifted onto the other foot and played in a through ball, which almost found his teammate for a 1v1. So he seems a little standoffish, and we've seen defenders like him struggle, like particularly Axel Disasi in the Premier League in terms of just waiting for the opposition player to make some kind of a decision and then being too slow to react. So he does have those moments. I unfortunately have had 4 games to watch, and all four he's at central midfield. He does tuck into the left back position at times and build up, like I mentioned. And against quicker threats, he does seem vulnerable. So a lot of the times when he tries to tackle, I think it's easy to get past him. So a lot of the quicker threats will be the biggest challenge to him if he plays at left back. So that would be like an area of concern for me. Whether he's able to cope 1v1 in a block against, I mean, I was going to say Jeremy Doku, but he plays on the other side. But like any good right winger who comes up against him 1v1, that could be like his first proper test of whether he makes it in the Premier League.
Well, look, Elise has already left to Byron confirmed as of this afternoon, so that's one less right winger that we have to worry about him having to go up against. That's for sure. Um, as we look at other questions, we have Adam asking, do you see Vega playing as more of a left back shifting into left center back or left back converting into midfield as a part of a 3-2 buildup? And we touched on this a little bit, but I don't know if you want to go deeper on just how he might be implemented. And I do feel, though, this is dependent upon who we're playing in midfield at the moment. If it's a kind of 2 or 3, obviously Caicedo maybe staying back a little bit deeper, has less opportunity maybe to press up as often. But do you have any additional thoughts on this?
If he does play preseason, I think he will be tried out in both positions. I
Hmm.
think that it will be sort of a process where Maresca sees if he's able to slot him as the auxiliary central midfielder or as, a makeshift centre back. Again, it comes down to whether he's good enough in the air, which will be tough to find out against Wrexham. But if you try to do that against, say, a Manchester City, then I think it'll be like, questions answered with regards to what he can do. I think both positions or both roles have their benefits. Obviously, if you keep him as a left centre back, if he's good enough in the air, great. Then you have like 3 giraffes guarding your back line. Nothing in the air goes past you, which is a great position to have. If you slot him into central midfield, Enzo might be under a lot of strain in terms of progressive duties. He will have to single-handedly run the pivot. Um, but I will also say that when they're facing the goal, there will be less pressure on Enzo to create magic out of something. I think Vega will offer quite a broad range of passing options and being able to pick out 1v1 wingers running into spaces. So there is that passing option there. Back to goal, Enzo will be under severe pressure unless Caicedo comes and helps him. So you figure out some way of making those three central midfielders work in tandem. Great. But I desperately, genuinely think that it'll be like trying each option out maybe multiple times and seeing where Vega is most comfortable and where his output remains the best.
And as we round out some of the listener questions, there's one just getting straight to the point from Postman asking, how ready for the Premier League is he? And I would garner, given the fact that he has had very few senior minutes in terms of football, that this is very much a jury is still out, but there is going to be an acclimatization period that we all need to prepare ourselves for, much like we did with Nico Jackson last year, in terms of getting ready for a lot of learning on the job from the young player. Is that where you also land, or do you feel as if maybe I'm underselling how ready he would be?
Yeah, I would probably give you a very safe answer here, and I would probably say I wish I had some kind of data or like some kind of information to go on in terms of his psychological slash mental makeup, like what he is like as a person or what his challenges have been. Like so far, I've been able to look at his story, and it's been pretty easy compared to the rest of the guys that we've had to pull up. Caicedo, for example, and everybody else. So it all depends on again the mental makeup of the player and how ready is he to make the step up. A lot of players have come and struggled. I'm surprised nobody in the listener questions asked for player parallels, because the one thing that came up to me was another Chelsea player, Dennis Zakaria, who
Mm.
came on loan to us, and he did pretty well. I would say, like, it was just a turbulent time to come at the club, and he did struggle a little bit, but ended up like putting in a couple of good performances against very good opponents. So there's every chance that he does very well in the Conference League, for example. I think that, like, it wouldn't be a stretch to imagine that the places we'll be going to in the group stages of the Conference League will be, a far cry from the Swiss League. So maybe he steps into those games and is able to offer something very productive. But I do have major concerns over his lack of pace, his lack of athleticism. I think he's prone to be exploited. You have to be ridiculously good as an athlete to survive in the Premier League. So either you hide it by playing him at centre back, or as a left back who doesn't bomb up and down. Great, but I think that's going to be one to watch. So from a technical standpoint, he's again, question marks. How good is he back to goal? How good will he be when people close him down furiously? So again, there are just too many blind spots, and there's a small sample size. Then I really haven't seen, how well he's able to do in a top league against top opposition. Basel weren't there in European sort of competition, so I haven't seen him against, you know, sometimes even when you try buying players from these leagues, you get the occasional match against Manchester United in the Champions League group stages, or, some Sporting in the Europa League group stages. There are no matches to go by. So it's a tough one for me to call to say, like, this is how he will fare. So this is probably the hardest one I've done as yet, because I have genuinely nothing to project on. But yeah, if the groundwork has gone in and we're able to get him for a decent amount price, then I guess keep the faith until it goes wrong.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Are you excited for Vega joining Chelsea? Are you jury's still out and have tons of questions about what are we doing when it comes to player recruitment and who Chelsea have signed this window? Let us know. Head over to YouTube and drop a comment, or join our Discord and have fun in the conversation there about this and other potential signings. But again, thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much to our listeners. Get ready for another crazy week in the world of Chelsea, and a countdown to the 24th of July when Chelsea's preseason gets underway in Santa Clara versus Wrexham to start their summer tour in the US. And that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.